We were reporting earlier on, and we have done clearly since the spring statement, on genuine concerns that the public have about the cost of living crisis and rising energy prices and the rest of it. But as someone who has run some of the biggest brands in the UK economy and particularly in UK retail, how worried are you? I mean, what is ASDA doing in recognition of the fact that demand from your customers is likely to fall over the foreseeable future as they tighten their belts?
Alastair, good afternoon and good to be with you. I think the first thing to say is that you and I have a couple of things in common. Apart from the fact that I think we were both born in Emsworth, I think that you and I have a similar age, and we have to be of that similar age to understand what the real effects of inflation are. We haven't seen serious inflation in this country, as you know, for over 30 years. And sadly, it's here. And once it takes root, it's quite hard to eradicate. What are we doing in ASDA? Well, we're doing the same as everybody will be wanting to do, and that is to make sure that we give our customers the very, very best value that we can do for them and help them ameliorate the costs that they're now facing and the costs that are coming across from every sector, whether it's energy, whether it's petrol, and whether it's food.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you're absolutely right about Emsworth. My father was doing navigational training on Thorney Island in those days when I was born in Emsworth. And you're absolutely right about the age thing as well. I tweeted the other day that I'd never known it worse than right now, although we've been through similar situations. But to have the combination of rising interest rates, falling demand, rising prices, rising taxation, rising national insurance, that is a collision that is going to make life brutally painful for ordinary consumers and brutally painful for people like you trying to serve those consumers.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, just doing some research recently, we know that our customers, our average customer is basically their incomes are down by about £11 a week on a year ago. And that's the biggest decline in expendable income that they probably had for 10 or 15 years. And people are going to have to make choices. They are going to have to tighten their belts. And sadly, there's not a lot we can do to fill the gap. We can help them, but we can't fill it entirely. And certainly, for our part, I was up in Leeds with ASDA this week, and we sat down for the whole day. And we're talking about what we're going to do to make sure that we make our life easier for our customers. But there's no quick solution.
Yeah, and my overall theme, and that's why I said to the team when I knew that you were kind enough to join us, because I think it is a big deal, is however painful it may seem to you or me as taxpayers, as citizens, as consumers, the fact of the matter is that what economists call aggregate demand, everything that is purchased, ordered from shops, online, wherever it might be, that's aggregate demand. That's the UK PLC. As that falls, your profitability will decline. Dividends to your shareholders and therefore pension funds will decline. And also opening new shops, new branches of ASDA, giving folk new jobs. That's all going to be under pressure as well. It really is the big macro picture.
Well, the good news is, and we always have to be glass half full, Alastair. Luckily, I'm a glass half full guy. The good news is that if you look back to recent events, look back at Brexit, look back at COVID, British business is pretty resilient. British business is pretty flexible. British business will come up with some answers. But yes, you're quite right. We will have to find ways of ameliorating these problems, and it's not an easy one. Government has a part to play here. I mean, if I'm honest with you, you alluded to the fact that I'm a Conservative peer, which I am, but I think the government's been fairly slow to recognise some of this problem coming up down the hill. I think so they've been slow, slightly tin-eared, if I might say so, about how we talk to our customers and talk to our constituents about how we're going to deal with the problems, and a bit slow in putting some actions in place to help them with their problems over the short term.
That's a fascinating response, because my next question generally, I could turn the camera around and show you, but you mentioned about tough decisions earlier on when you were talking about us as consumers. Rishi Sunak, the Tory Chancellor, said, I can't do everything. He said that in the spring statement. He said it in a podcast interview with the BBC just a couple of nights ago. He did have choices. He's sitting on a war chest of around about £50 billion. He could have released more of that to those in real need. As a businessman and as a Tory, did he make the right choice there? Or is that an example of what you've just called him being a bit tinny when it comes to hearing?
Well, I think the problem the government's got is that, of course, that it's had a situation for the last 2 years where it has literally been handing out hundreds of millions of pounds quite sensibly in support of COVID. And it's very hard to explain to people once COVID, if you like, has started to disappear, why there aren't similar amounts of money around to help us with this inflation. Now, governments can't actually just close the door on inflation or pay for the inflation bill, but governments can look caring. Governments can do some things. And just in my own industry, for instance, I mean, there are a number of legislative things coming through now in business that we're having to deal with, whether it's plastic tax, whether it's a new legislation on fats and sugars, etc. And are there things that we could do that actually could be delayed whilst we get through inflation and before we push hard? And it'll be the same conversation we're having now about energy. You know, we're having now very suddenly to look at alternative energies. Well, we should have perhaps thought about that earlier, because it's been quite clear that over-dependence on, oil and gas from the east has not served us well.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I want to go into that list that you began to talk about there, because you say about energy prices. My domestic energy bill will go up. Stuart Rose's domestic energy bill will go up. ASDA's energy bill will go up. The energy bill of all of the people who manufacture stuff that you sell to us will go up. Your national insurance as an employer will go up. Your corporation tax will go up from 19 to 25% in the next 12 months. Your costs are rising as well. Those are choices that this Chancellor made between 2019 and right now. Tough choices, the wrong choices.
Well, you and I are in violent agreement, Alastair, because we're old enough, as I remember saying to you earlier, that the last time we had serious inflation, it took 10 years to eradicate. And, I don't believe, for instance, that inflation is suddenly going to come to an end in 2022 or at the end of 2022. This is now going to continue for some time. And the government's got a very fine line to walk, because it has to keep the economy moving and growing. If we don't do that, we'll get into a recessionary period, which would be worse. On the other hand, we can't fuel inflation. So it's a very tricky one. But, I would just emphasize to the powers that be that they have to, first of all, remember that we are the sixth largest economy in the world. I myself was walking down the street the other day and saw a large queue of people queuing outside a food bank. And I thought to myself, here we are, the sixth largest economy in the world, and we've got people queuing for food. That can't be right, and it can't be sustainable. So we've got to find a way in the short term of helping them.
Sure. I was reading a fascinating piece the other day, and again, I love this theme of you rubbing my nose in how old I am, but only by admitting that you're the same age. We both, in the context of that, only just that inflationary era, we both remember very well, and we're lucky enough in our lives to have known them. The likes of Sir Geoffrey Howe and Margaret Thatcher, and later on Nigel Lawson. One of the great debates in that era of the late 70s and the early 80s was inflation, and it was about money supply. This piece that I was reading the other day was saying the Bank of England have been woeful because they've been so slow to take a tough line on interest rates to see off the inflation that has been a key theme of this interview and your concerns. And also they've printed money as if there's no tomorrow, maybe because of the coronavirus, maybe because of worries about an economy grinding to a halt. But the Bank of England's in the dock right now as well, is it not?
Well, yes. I mean, listen, I'm not a career economist, but, there's no doubt about it that some of what we're seeing now is the effect of what we've had with quantitative easing. Government has slowed down on quantitative easing, but what quantitative easing did for a considerable period of time is it raised the value of assets everywhere, which has effectively been a fuel to inflation. And we're now seeing that. Now, the government's got a tough line, because if inflation takes hold, they'll be tempted to put interest rates up. If they put interest rates up, the economy will slow down. If the economy slows down, we've got a worse situation. So it's a very tough line. And I don't envy Rishi Sunak in his job. I'm slightly more nuanced now to not what can we do on the macro, but can we help, if you like, those people in society who are more stressed at the bottom end of society get through this. We have to expect that those people, if you like, in the higher earning power, will just have to make do. And I'm one of those people, so fine. I will cut my cloth according to my means, but we've got to find a way of helping those people who are queuing in food banks. That's what I really fear for.
An intriguing answer, and the council tax rebate on energy prices is a good example of that. If you're lucky enough to live in a house that's bigger than Band D, you ain't going to get anything. But if you're in A to D, you will get the 150 quid. The raw politics of this are people have choices. They've got choices in the local government elections in May, and then there will be a general election. It could be tomorrow. Now, the law's changed, or perhaps more likely 2014. In your view, and I take your point about not being an economist, but you don't get to run M&S, Ocado and ASDA without knowing a little bit about the numbers of how these things work. I'm slightly concerned that Labour seem to be on a bit of a winning formula with this windfall tax on the oil giants as far as Joe and Joanna Public are concerned.
Well, we will see what the public think because they're going to have a chance to vote in May. We'll see what they think about having, a jam tomorrow in terms of income tax reduction in a couple of years' time, as was announced a couple of days ago. And we'll see what they think in terms of the current crisis that they're facing. I mean, with national insurance having gone up and with all the other costs that have gone up, whether it's on VAT going back to normal levels, whether it's petrol going up, whether it's, factory or farm gate prices coming through and reflecting in increased prices in stores, they'll see, and they may well vote in an interesting way in May.
If they do, would it still be your advice and guidance to Rishi Sunak? And I'm very struck by something that you said earlier on about helping those that are really in need. And there's talk in the papers this morning about maybe another emergency budget before the one that's scheduled for November to go back to that war chest. Don't talk to me about a penny off income tax in 2024. Talk to me about people who are struggling to exist on universal credit now, struggling with national insurance hikes. Dip in and try and help a little of those who are trying to live within their budgets, but the government can help just a little bit with that surplus of taxpayers' money that they've got in the bank.
Well, if it were me, I would do it.
Yeah. Which particular bit? I mean, and I'm not being silly or trying to catch you out because you're too clever for that anyway. But is universal credit the most effective route, or is it a little bit more on helping poor households and poor families with their energy bills? How would Chancellor Rose do it?
Well, I think I'd probably do something practically linked to the short-term hit that we've got at the moment. Now, one would hope that energy bills will come down a bit. They may not come back to historic levels, but they will come down at some point in time. We will find that some of the input prices that we've got coming through now, which are the result of the tragic war in Ukraine, will come back down. So I would do something as a short-term, if you like, package to help those people, which doesn't become, if you like, a long-term cost for government. And it's a tough one, but I think it's doable. And I would certainly be saying to people, listen, if you are better off, then it's time for you to put your hand in your pocket or accept that you are not going to get the similar benefits because we've got to help those who are in need. And there are a lot of people in need in this country, as I say, which is the 6th largest economy in the world. It's quite shameful that we've got the sort of poverty that we've got.
Stuart, great to talk to you. Welcome back any time. And thank you very much for giving us so much of your time this Saturday afternoon. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.